I think looking at the gaps in society and being a conduit to what those realities really are and how clients, no matter if they're Jarritos Mexican soda or Bumble, how they can fill those gaps with purposeful conversation and context and programming. I feel like that's our job. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vela-Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vela-Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vela-Williamson. This season, our focus is on communication trailblazers. Today, I'm joined by Audrey Ponzio. Audrey Ponzio is the CEO and founder of APC Collective, where she and her team develop communications and community engagement programs to help clients grow their reach, relevance, and impact. Specializing in integrated and inclusive campaigns, Audrey has developed best-in-class programs for leading brands, including Google, Audible, GE, Starbucks, Kraft Foods, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and PepsiCo, among others. Welcome, Audrey.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, I'm so happy to speak with you. Tell us, Audrey, a little bit more about your background and your work today.
I think it's kind of a funny start, and I don't know if many other professionals that are in our trade that come from some sort of diverse background have a similar story, but I started out in PR working for Fleishman-Hillard. And at the time when I was hired as an intern, I was the only person of diverse ethnic background in reality. And so when I officially got hired 6 months later, post-graduation, I was put on the diversity team for pretty much every account you could think of, whether it was Dell or SBC, now AT&T and ShareAKid. I was kind of the person that was in charge of reflecting certain nuances or realities back to clients and being that conduit. And I didn't think much of it then. I mean, it was kind of typecasting and a lack of diversity as a whole within the office, but it became kind of a signature hallmark of sorts of how the industry welcomed me and how I kind of took place and position within the industry. So that kind of began my journey. And at the time, I was like, that's kind of a lot of responsibility to be the only voice of difference or representation at those tables. And I was fairly junior, but I kind of dove in and thought, well, if I'm here and not many others are, if anybody else, then I'm going to learn as much as I can, not just about my community, but all communities. I'm going to try and do the best in representing the voices that aren't invited to the conversations in terms of counsel and programming. And so from there, I ended up getting hired by a client. They dropped the agency retainer and took on a junior staffer that was kind of running point on a lot of the details. And they were a tech startup that eventually got bought by First Data. But in order to get acquired, they needed to look lean. So I remember my boss calling me on a Sunday saying, we have a major announcement tomorrow. We're going to have to introduce layoffs to the team. I said, putting my PR hat on. I'm like, okay, do you want a statement? Do you want CEO talking points? What do you need? He's like, no, sweetie, it's you. It's you and a lot of other positions that, seem that we can't necessarily explain in this next phase of where we're going. So that was like my first taste with making leaps and decisions in corporate America. And I wasn't devastated because I was too young to know any different. So I started consulting for previous clients and contacts that I had met through Fleischmann. And I went traveling in that 23-year-old, 24-year-old way of I'm going to go abroad and visit friends. And I came back and I'm like, okay, now I have to pay for my trip and figure that out. And I had two offers, one from LatinWorks and one from Enviromedia. And I loved the social impact and the environmental kind of bent that Enviromedia was built on. But LatinWorks felt like home. And it felt like home because it was people from all over Latin America, the United States, Mexico, Argentina, Spain, you name it. And walking in the building, there was music and there was fun and just everything that I had missed growing up in El Paso, Texas. And so I didn't love the client roster, but I thought, well, I can shape it and I can help these bigger brands with a lot of money do a lot of good within a community that they're already wanting to engage in and target. And so I declined the Enviromedia offer And I went to LatinWorks, and I'm still very good friends with the three original owners, as well as many members of the team. I'm actually having conversations with one of them today. And I loved it there. And after 3 years, for personal reasons, I wanted to move to New York. I followed a boy. I would say the most ambitious part of my person is my heart, and I followed it. And I tucked an application from Columbia University in my suitcase. And I'm like, oh, if it doesn't work out, I'll go to grad school, because I've always wanted to go to grad school. And they had a program that I was interested in. And I ended up courting Adelman, and I say courting because I went through 6 interviews. I cold called the head of their multicultural department, and I pitched myself as a viable account supervisor that they needed to meet and connect with. And I was relentless in getting that interview, getting the 6 that followed, or the 5 that followed, and getting the position. Eventually I moved to New York and was with Edelman for nearly a decade. When I left, I was SVP of multicultural, leading the charge for the New York office, but really responsible for the network for multicultural, all things engagement with private public clients. After 9 years, I graduated from SEPA, the program that I was interested in and going to all along. And I decided to move back home after a year. I stayed in New York for 10 years. I was consulting post Edelman. I say that I graduated from that big firm that I love and admire and respect, and still connect with Richard semi-regularly via email with random comments and posts on social. I started my own things, and that's what brought me back to Texas. And that's APC Collective.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And I, really resonate with a lot of what you said. I think you said at the very beginning, I don't know if a lot of pros start the way I do when you have a diverse background. And more, I would say they probably do, Audrey, right? I have the same kind of story too, where, well, actually I started and it was a Hispanic focused boutique firm, but I think a lot of us end up automatically being put in that box. And you have to make a decision on whether, am I going to do the best I can with this opportunity? So externally people see us one way, and our brains just want to categorize things. So they say, okay, you must understand this community, or you must have a background here. And I love what you said, that you said, well, if I have this opportunity, I'm going to make the most of it, and I'm going to research and learn more about these communities, because that is absolutely what I think sometimes is missing. Is that in some organizations, they say, well, you must know these things, right? There's an assumption there. And it's up to the pro to decide whether or not they want to embrace that opportunity and really learn about that community to be a good representative, and go from this idea of, because I've always said, well, hey, if you're going to make me a token, I'm not going to be the only, I'm going to make sure I make room for more people here. So absolutely. So I love that about your story. I think it's very relevant, and we're still working through that today. Yeah. And so I really like that we open up the conversation with that.
I think when I left Edelman, one of my biggest complaints, because I bled blue. I was an Edelmanite thrown through 1,000%. And one of my biggest issues was that I didn't want everybody that looked different, that came from a different background, Asian, Black, Hispanic. I didn't want them to come to multicultural. I'm like, this is what happened to me. I don't want that to be the case for people who have interest in public affairs, corporate, consumer, health, digital, because they're brilliant. They're not just Black and brown. They're actually brilliant. And they deserve to infect and inform strategy for the entire network, not just my team and not just my clients. I need hiring to look different across the board. Please don't give me all the diverse candidates, because not all of them want to be here. I'd rather infect and inform other candidates that don't represent necessarily the diversity that clients are looking for, because I believe in a world where eventually we'll get to more mindful marketing, not just multicultural marketing. So I was lobbying probably too hard for them to rethink their ways. But when you're making millions of dollars as a department, it's hard to make that case.
Yeah. And I think that's what that struggle is this idea of what is mainstream, what is general market these days. And if you look at the data, it is multicultural. It is that we are loving each other more. At least in the US, right? But globally, the numbers are the same way too, is that we're loving each other more. So there's more groups coming together. There's more people working together, and there's more people in partnership together. So that's just the way our nation's going, for sure. And identity is complex. I was thinking about this just the other day. I'm like, if I was to actually take and think about this intersectionality that we talk about in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that we're more than one identity part, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, what is my most dominant identity? And I was like, I would guess it's for me, female. Like I just number one. And then so where does the fact that I'm Hispanic or Latino or however, whatever term I want to align with at the moment, how much of my percentage of my pie is that, right? Well, it depends on the day, depends on the moment sometimes.
Yeah. Cheskin actually did research with people in Espanol, and they called it the POP study. And it was when your identity comes into play, it's situational and it depends on the context. So at work, this notion of code switching, I think they were calling it out way before it became a popular term. At work, you put on a different layer and you may speak more, less Spanglish or communicate in the way that you think the dominant culture represented in that cohort or industry is going to accept you most. At home with your friends, you may feel more Latina. With your parents, you may feel even more so. So I think identity is contextual, depending on our reaction to the environment that we're surrounded in.
Absolutely. I would totally agree. I've always said, well, I'm kind of a chameleon, right? I'm going to find out how do I fit into this environment best so that I can relate to people. And that's absolutely right. And I think in the workplace, there is that notion of you want to be your whole self, but I think we have to give ourselves the grace that we're a little bit more like a kaleidoscope in that we're going to shift how we show ourselves depending on the situation. Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense for everyone.
I love that.
Yeah. So going back into APC Collective, because I have had the pleasure of collaborating with you all, and what a smart group, what a kind group. I just love all the nuances you have as a strong team. But tell us a little bit more about APC Collective. And when you started the firm, like what was the big why behind it?
I started the firm, graduating from a major institution like Edelman as an SVP. I knew it was going to be hard to find a job. I knew that senior talent doesn't get picked up within a day or 48 hours. So I'm like, I don't know that I want to wear anyone else's name on my back. And I had that very clear, I feel like I worked for the best. And at this point, I've been trained. I know how to make money. I know how to make presentations. I know how to share ideas, hopefully that inspire and get people to sign checks. And I'm going to try doing this for clients that we couldn't take on because they were too small. So I just started calling a lot of people. And I had this idea of a collective because I knew I don't know everything. And I'm better when there's more people bringing their perspectives and ideas and heart and intention to every situation. So as a team of one, I registered the LLC APC Collective because I knew eventually it would be about collaboration and be super porous. So for the first 2 years, I consulted for anyone that needed help. And the people who needed the most help were actually at agencies that didn't necessarily have PR teams that were fully established or fully staffed, but they had accounts and they had business. So one of the PR teams was an agency named Inspire, led at the time by Lonnie Limon, who was a good friend of mine. He became a better friend throughout this process, but he was a friend of mine from New York. And he needed someone to help manage the Sprint account. And I did, fell in love with the team, fell in love with the clients. And there was a CEO shift. Marcelo Clara, a brilliant self-made billionaire, took the helm of Sprint and was getting it ready for bigger things. And it eventually got acquired by T-Mobile. But in that shakeup, like all CEOs have their own teams and put people in C-suites and decision-making abilities. And so Inspire lost the Sprint account from an advertising perspective. But we had done so well, thanks to my team, we had done so well in PR that the CMO wanted to keep PR. Well, agency leads have different realities and different perspectives. And it was a blow to the team that they wanted to keep PR and dismiss advertising and social and everything that came with the advertising budget. And so I'm really grateful. I think it was Tommy Thompson, the CEO, while he was the president. And Tommy said, Audrey, if this is where you launch your agency, go for it. But we're not going to let them keep PR only. And I was like, Tommy, these are people's jobs. Like, doesn't that mean we won? Like, didn't we win something in establishing that kind of favor and weathering the transition? He's like, yeah, but this is a bigger question. And I'm totally fine if you and the team want to split off. And I talked to the client and they said, yeah, we'll absolutely back you. I was like, are you sure? And they're like, yep, we'll help you figure it out. So I tried to convince the team to come, but, one was recently married. Actually, I think they were both recently married. And I even talked to their husbands, tried to convince them that this is going to work. I promised, but I couldn't guarantee anything because we only had one client. And I ended up bringing on Jennifer Mesa, who you know, as one of my first hires. And I had met someone super competent and amazing, Ingrid Quiros. She was at Edelman at the time. And I just hired the people who said yes. And they happened to be a little bit more junior, but I worked with them and raised them to be my right and left hands. And we built it together. So 7 years in August, but it was the help and backing of Sprint clients that I'm still in contact with. I don't know that we have any T-Mobile account work right now, but we've also taken on T-Mobile since our inception.
Wow. Thank you for your honesty. I will tell you, I find it so refreshing. And I love the honesty of how resourceful and grassroots it really was coming together. And I think that's so important for aspiring pros of color, aspiring pros who want to start their own business, but it just looks too big and scary from the outside. And I love that you share that story because I think it's so much more achievable for those who want to start their own business or try to be independent when they hear how it actually became.
I went to, I think we started August 15th. August 14th, I'm in Best Buy here in Austin and about to shop for computers because I have to give my team computers. And I'm overwhelmed and nervous and I break down. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, we're going to figure it out, ma'am. And I'm like, oh my God, here I am burdening this 21-year-old with my problems. And I bought 2 laptops and 2 bags and like whatever gear I thought made sense to start off. And my sister, my mother, and my nephews drove with me to Dallas because we had taken up co-working space. And they kind of dropped me off on my first day. So I'm happy you think it looks polished because I think we try and that intention comes through with the work and the work ethic and the integrity with which we pursue work and client business. But I don't aspire to be an Edelman. Mm-hmm. I think there's lots of lovely work that comes out of that shop, but I want to do it differently.
And I know even sometimes through having my own, I've been able to work with so many more professionals that I would have always loved to team up with. Just like you and I had a chance to work together. And so I would say that that's certainly an advantage is you can take on smaller clients who may not have the big agency budget, but if you have that big brain, that can go with you anywhere. So I love that. Yeah. And what I also love about you, Audrey, and APC Collective is that, your team is said to be mission led. What does that mean to you?
I think we have to feel it. And I've felt this way since the beginning of my career. I feel like the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And in my career, I have given the work meaning in the sense that I do take it seriously. I do think that this little advisory, promoting this little event to get people screened for heart disease or diabetes, blood sugar checks. Like, I think these little things can add up and change the trajectory of someone's life. And it's not just with health accounts that I started with in the beginning. I think looking at the gaps in society and being a conduit to what those realities really are and how clients, no matter if they're Jarritos Mexican soda or Bumble, how they can fill those gaps with purposeful conversation and context and programming. I feel like that's our job. Otherwise, what are we doing? And so I think the mission-led part is I literally want everyone on the team to feel like they see a bigger picture in every assignment. And if we can't see it, this may not be the work for you. Let's switch you to an account where you feel it. And that's not always possible, but to the extent that we can, we try and shift team members around based on passion points and ability to see kind of through the weeds into what kind of impact we can have if we add a mission to it that's larger than just the client mandate.
Yeah, that's so smart. That was a big part of me wanting to have my own shop as well as that. I'm the kind of person where when I'm excited, you see it. And people love when I get passionate, but when I can't, and it's so tough as a business owner because some of the things that I wish I was passionate about because it's lucrative, it just is not there for me. And so it's smart to work with your team's natural passion points and align them with that. And then, of course, attract the kind of clients that are going to be mission driven as well. And that just makes it all better. And when you can connect those resources in the community to the actual needs in the community, we're absolutely in such a great position as public relation and marketing pros to take that CEO's hand and say, this way, let's go upstream and meet the need and help fix things. And that's the best part of our jobs, I think, for sure.
Completely. And I think every client has this inherent want or desire to self-actualize and to get to the higher ground in any aspect. And I feel like that's what you tap into. How could we change the game or the system or the conversation for the better?
Well, you all certainly have an impressive roster of clients that you have served. Is there a particular client or a campaign that really illustrates this concept of what we're discussing, which is really trailblazing and making way for others in the professional space?
I think each of them carry a mission. I'm proud of all the work. I think I've been asked which one is your favorite. And I'm they're favorites for different reasons. I think every client, we have a two-time client, Joni Carswell, who started a tech platform specifically designed to increase parent engagement, which was amazing, Living Tree. And at some point, she graduated from the product lead to CEO, and then they got acquired, and she got courted by Laura Bush and the Texan by Nature organization, which is a nonprofit dedicated to increasing conservation across industry in the state of Texas. And we went with her to Texan by Nature. And when I think about what Joni has done to increase this notion of return on conservation and a sustainability mindset within industries across Texas, Texas is 94% privately owned. So you're going to have to work with industry and landowners to think about conservation differently. And in a state that is so good to business, Joni has really been intentional about moving the needle and getting the state to make sure that business is good to Texas and to the environment. And so the work continues, and it started and it's growing. But I think in terms of trailblazing, I'm super proud of the work that we've helped with, inspire, and collaborate on, because I think environmental change is absolutely needed. And so that's one. Jarritos, which is a Mexican soda that I grew up with. It was actually our party drink. My dad would go to Juarez and pick up the bottles and come back when we would have barbecues or birthday parties. And they came to us in 2015 with a video idea. And it was really a bigger concept around connecting the dots as it relates to the American experience and how truly we all come from immigrant communities, no matter the time span, right? Whether the only non-Mexican in my family was Sicilian, and he came through Ellis Island in 1905. Everybody else was from Mexico, with the exception of some natives, because they do have indigenous background as well on my mother's side. But their claim was everybody has a common immigrant threat and immigrant reality. And at the time, 2015, there was a lot of political rhetoric that was super negative around the impacts of immigration and the lack of contribution immigrants made to U.S. society. And this brand took offense. Eric Delamar, who's actually French, but he leads the brand as brand director. He worked with an agency named Wallo, who's amazing in Dallas, an ad agency. Eric and Wallo, and I think it was Laluran, who's the founder and co-partner. I think they had an idea to connect with Diego Luna to create a small mini film or mini video about the commonalities of being an immigrant. It was so poignant, beautifully done. Kudos to the Wallo team and Diego Luna and his production company. It was so beautifully done, you couldn't be mad at it. And it was poetry in motion. And so we got to engage nonprofits and celebrities and influencers to promote and share it. And it won all the awards and did all the things. And we got millions of views in the first weeks of launching. But I think about that spirit that Eric brings. No matter how big we get, we're not going to forget where we came from. And it's a Mexican-owned brand. And we're not going to forget who made us big, which is a lot of the immigrant communities that would put the product on trucks. For the original food trucks were worker trucks, serving lunch to construction workers or outside workers. And so it was Eric's mission to make sure that as the country questioned what immigrants brought to the table, Jarritos was going to stand in defense of the immigrant experience. And so I feel like that to me was, I don't know if it blazed trails for new professionals or if it did anything other than say, we see you, we're not backing down, we're going to continue to support and champion our community and all communities. And we're going to make this one moment bigger than it could have been through the tools and tactics that we have as marketers. And so that was beautiful work.
Yeah. And I would say, it's trailblazing work because it's brave, right? Especially for someone who's not going to say, well, a soft drink brand should do that, right? It's absolutely brave and it's bold, but it's timeless. And I think that that's what the struggle is. The more I get into diversity, equity, inclusion work, a lot of it just has to do with this very juvenile thing we have. And then probably goes back to our cave people days of trying to find the right tribe and be safe. But it's like, don't touch my stuff. And so people are so worried about losing, right? Their things, their place, their money, their shares. And I think there's so much more when you do collaborate and you do say, hey, this is important to everyone. And I like that what you did is really pride provoking.
Yeah.
You know, it looks at heritage. And it's interesting when I looked into it, I'm like, why are some of these cultural months heritage months and why are history months? And I'm like, I think it's more heritage we need to start thinking about of instilling that pride in what we have passed down and how that shapes us as people and how we can be intentional about what we pass on from there. So I love that.
I've long lobbied for calling them legacy months. I'm like, shouldn't we just acknowledge, to your point, heritage contribution? But to me, it's legacy, and legacy continues, and it's alive and well today. I think to the bigger point of the tribal dynamics, evolutionary theory would tell you that, there is instinct and discernment, right? Because it kept people safe. If there were quote unquote foreign invaders, it kept people safe to have that kind of instinctual judgment on, I need to protect my own. How we deal with that now and acknowledging that those instincts are real, but how do we get along? Because we know that collaboration and cooperation ensures our survival. I think that's what we need to relearn and consistently teach all generations, how to get past those very tribal instincts that existed for a reason that don't have to exist in the same form now.
Yes, absolutely. And it's that conscious overriding of that system is what I like to champion. And I think that this leads me into that next question I have is the work that you do in inclusive marketing. I think it does help point to the conversation we're having. What are pros not thinking about when it comes to be more inclusive in our work so that we can help, I guess, override the system in our own ways?
I started off in tech and public affairs and always did kind of diversity on the side. And then I intentionalized the diversity work through Latinworks and eventually Edelman. And now I think one of the beauties of having my own shop is I can be this and that. I don't have to be all one thing. And I'm not just the person that you bring in for diversity conversations. I want to talk strategy and impact at a larger scale. And I think when people think about inclusivity, it's very easy to check a box. It's very easy to put in a spreadsheet of saying, oh, we have a minority owned firm and this is the firm that's going to do the work for this particular audience. And I caution that. I completely caution that because I don't necessarily think that you need to farm out work for a very specific segment to just one firm. I think you need to bring a mindset into how are we going to engage all consumers in the most mindful way and who is best suited to do that work. Sometimes the smaller shop, diverse owned shop can do everything. And I believe that. I think we work with one strategist who has her own company, Cheryl Overton. She's brilliant. She's brilliant and she deserves to run the show. But getting picked just for the diversity work, to me, does the whole brand an injustice. Because if you lean into those multicultural insights and to those diverse insights, you're going to find more nuance and opportunity than if you just relegated them to a specific audience. And so I feel like if you control the purse strings, tap talent for their biggest ideas to be the most inclusive, but don't necessarily think that if you do an HHM press release or Hispanic Heritage Month initiative or a small grant, that has it covered, because people live in their context and in their color and their identity 365 days a year. And too often it's more of an initiative or it's a smaller budget that goes to a smaller firm, but it's not intentional at the macro scale. And so I take issue with that because I think we could do better.
And I think on the other side too, what I have seen is that sometimes owners or pros, they try to be more inclusive and they say, well, we're going to look for and hire a minority owned firm or a pro or a consultant. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that pro or firm actually does work in that community or has done the work to research that community. Just because we're of the culture or of the right shade of color doesn't mean we actually specialize in that space. And so that's something to look for as well. So I like what you're saying is being mindful and looking for those big ideas. And really not trying to stereotype either way, right? Because I've certainly had that. Audrey, I say that some of the things that I felt held me back or limited me at earlier parts of my career, all of a sudden been leverage opportunities for me now. But in our country, unfortunately, the support and sponsorship of more inclusive marketing and PR campaigns kind of ebbs and flows in popularity. And that absolutely, by numbers, business case wise, should not be. So it's something that we should all think about. And I think that's really, really important.
Hire diverse owned firms for more than just diversity work. Like, don't relegate them to just that. That may be a great entry point and a good RFP model, but invite them in to reflect and inform the bigger team. Chances are 9 out of 10, they will have bigger ideas that could be for the most amount of people, not just the ones that they look like.
Yeah, and absolutely. I would also say, and don't just think, well, this is a big idea, so I need to go to a big firm or I need to go to a firm in a huge city, right? So I have felt that sometimes just where I'm based is limiting. That why can't a brilliant idea come out of San Antonio just as likely as it could come out of New York or DC? And the more that I work with pros across the globe, really, I'm like, Audrey, we can hold our own just fine.
Right? That's something that took leaving Manhattan to realize, like, oh, wait a minute, these little bubbles and the conference rooms that we got stuck in, or getting invited to different mega institutions and industry leaders for conversation. That's not where reality lives. Reality is in East Austin, or I don't know what part of San Antonio you live in. Reality is in El Paso and in Long Beach or San Joaquin. Like, reality is so much more than what happens in those bigger cities and those conference rooms and those discussions. So why not make sure that we're tapping talent that reflects reality outside those bubbles? And I feel like COVID brought a lot of trauma and a lot of hurt and a lot of loss. But one of the beauties is that it made talent universally available anywhere. As clients, I think at least our clients don't care where we live or where we're based. I'm hoping that that opens the doors for a lot of brilliant minds that don't necessarily want to leave their families or where they come from to go to the bigger conference rooms. Because to me, that's all that is the conference room. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, or a zip code. And I think that's absolutely correct. So I do see you as a trailblazer. You're someone I was able to connect with through the Hispanic Public Relations Association of Texas. You helped start the Texas chapter. And so that enough makes you a trailblazer. But as someone who's making the path smoother for pros coming after you, what is the legacy you would like to leave for future generations?
I think it's already happening. I'm so impressed, and I've had the opportunity to teach at UT for one semester. I'm going to go back next year, but I've spoken a lot to students, and I feel like the talent that's coming up now, they're not weighted by chips on their shoulders. And I'll totally own my chips. I think they're inherited. I think I grew up with them. I think I was taught to run faster and jump higher. And I assume that that's the role I have to play in every moment, which is heavy sometimes. I think it served me most of the time, but it's heavy. I don't think they're coming in with the same issues. I hope not. And I hope that we have changed perception and conversation so much that they're not going to have to deal with the typecasting, that they're going to see themselves as bigger than just the cultural context they happen to be arbitrarily born into, that they explore other avenues like astronomy and math and all the things that I didn't know existed as an avenue of possibility for me when I was first entering school. I went with the most intuitive, but I hope they're not marred or weighted by any perceptions of lack or otherness. And I see that already happening. So I don't know that I did anything to help with that, but I would hope the legacy that I have built or that our team continues to build is that you can use your time on the planet wisely and you can use it to change things in whatever avenue happens to be most intuitive to you. But hopefully the next generation knows that already. And I think they do. So I want to do good work and I want to be known for it. Only the work. I don't care about the awards or accolades, but I want to know that people come to us because they know they're going to get a lot of heart, a lot of intention, a lot of care, and some brilliant ideas that hopefully move the needle for the better.
I love it. I love it. So Audrey, I think we've had an example of it today, but I do like to ask all my guests, what does smart talk mean to you?
One, I think you're brilliant. And you've talked a lot about what you like and about me, but I think I've been impressed with you since day one. I think we got connected via Amelia and HPRA. I think your ideas are always spot on. You're always thinking bigger and beyond the current brief or moment to get to the biggest, highest place as fast as possible. And I think Smart Talk is just using your time wisely to take conversations to bigger places. So I love that you've created a forum that does just that. And I think you do that through all your work and extracurricular authorships and activities that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I love having these really intelligent conversations that help us move that needle. So thanks for being a part of that. Well, Audrey, I've enjoyed my time with you, and I'm sure a lot of people want to connect with you. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you directly?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me. Audrey Ponzio on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Audrey, so much for your time and sharing all your knowledge and heart with us today.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for the invite.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us for today's episode. We love unpacking communication topics to elevate our industry practice. Keep an eye out for the release of Smart Talk, the book, this fall by following the podcast and our MVW Communication social media channels. And if you enter your email at mvw360.com/book, you'll get updates on the release of my book. You'll be the first to know every milestone we make. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.